So, fellow Mandalorians, the finale of Season 3 is here, and most people were wrong with regards to all of those theories, you know, such as there was no other spies, meaning no Axe Woves being a traitor, no Armorer being a traitor, no Din Djarin death, no Boba Fett coming in, no Mythosaur doing anything. I mean, the Mythosaur was in it, but not really doing anything. So this finale went a way that people expected in some areas, obviously. Moff Gideon stuff, Mandalorian battle, the fight for Mandalore. But I think it most certainly would have subverted a lot of people's expectations. Not that that inherently makes it, it didn't meet my theories or expectations, so thus it's bad. You should never do that. Never go into anything expecting something to happen, and if it doesn't happen, then it's not good. But that being said, was this finale still like good, if that makes sense? So what we're going to do is get into my thoughts and my overall review right at the end of this video. We're going to go through the events of the episode in the meantime, recap it as usual. Of course, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below to how things ended, how you feel about Season 3 in general. Give this video a like if you do go on to enjoy it, and let's just get right into this. So immediately, the episode picks up more or less right after Paz Vizsla's death. We have Bo talking to Axe Woves, who is making his way out of the atmosphere. I mean, those must be some pretty powerful jetpacks to kind of break through the atmosphere. I'm kind of joking because this is Star Wars. But yeah, he's making his way up, and at this point, I was thinking that, okay, is there a traitor? I mentioned in my last week's review, the Armorer felt a little bit off to me, but the thing about the Armorer that didn't really make sense with regards to that theory of her being one of the spies is just, A, she's the Armorer, B, why would Moff Gideon be surprised when Elia Kane informed him about how Bo-Katan's people were united with the Children of the Watch? Surely the Armorer would have told him that. So, do you know what I mean? It didn't really make so much sense there. But Axe Woves, I was just like, maybe he's got such an ambition to rule that he would do that kind of tropey thing where Moff Gideon promised him something and he was kind of salty about Bo-Katan. But that didn't happen either. So, either way, he makes his way up to the fleet, and this is where things, practically for the whole episode, were really kicking off. One thing I will say is that this episode, in terms of a spectacle, was very entertaining, especially with all the Mandalorian action. I mean, the show's called The Mandalorian. This season has been gearing up to a lot of Mandalorians for the first time in a long time. Sure, we've seen caves full of Children of the Watch before, and in Season 2 we met Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks' character and Axe Woves and stuff, but this season we can't deny that there is enjoyment in seeing some kind of Clone Wars action unfolding on screen. So while Bo-Katan is being pursued by the Beskar alloy troopers, we have Din Djarin escape his restraints and take out the troopers who were escorting him to the debriefing room. So immediately here, I was just thinking, so there's another theory out the window with regards to people thought, that's something I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, if he didn't die, people were thinking that maybe his mind could get wiped, that the Dr. Pershing mind wiping thing wasn't only for him, but maybe a foreshadowing that there could be this tragic ending with Din Djarin basically not remembering anything. And that would have sucked. Like, ultimately, one thing I do want to say here before I get into my full thoughts at the end of this video in the review section is that I think, well, A, I would have been pissed if Din died. I would have been pissed if his mind got wiped. That would have just disgraced everything. So I'm glad that he's all right. So at this point, I do think, though, as things are unfolding, I understand that it's a quicker episode. It was only around 38 minutes. That's with credits, by the way. So it was very fast-paced. That works in the episode's favor with action and just kind of keeping you engaged, and there's a lot going on. But I will say that things were feeling a little bit too easy at this point. He took a bit of blaster fire to his plot armor, a bit of flamethrower, but again, Grogu came in here, spammed the no button, and helped him out just in time. And so this is where he's like, right, this isn't going to end. I'm going to need you to be brave. So we have Grogu and Din essentially tag teaming for the rest of the episode, going after Moff Gideon. Now, this is where Din communicates with R5. He wanted R5 to enter the base and get the schematics so it can reveal where Moff Gideon's operation room is. Now, I'm sure that Din would have eventually have found the operation room. I was just thinking at the time, this is a lot of dependency on a droid, but that is very Star Wars at the same time. So my inner fan was just like, go on R5. He was making his little scared droid noises, but he made his way down into the base, and we had the little freaking mouse droids as well get alerted to his presence. That was a bit of nice, subtle Star Wars humor there. R5 was successful, so it'd be making R2-D2 pretty proud with the amount of times R2 has done stuff like this as well. This episode jumps around quite a lot, so I do apologize if I'm just going through like 15-second recaps to one thing to another thing. This is when we have Axe Woves make his way to the fleet and tells everyone to actually load themselves onto the dropship. So this is where we got like so many cool moments of Mandalorians just like, jumping out of space at this time, making their way onto the dropships with the armorer. Now we're back with Din Djarin, and he tells R5 to lower each one of the shields down at a time so he could take each guard on at a time. Now, I thought Din was really badass here, taking on each one of the troopers. I did think to myself, where was Grogu? I think they didn't put him in these scenes because it just would have been way too easy. Sure, you could implement some story logic there of how Din just wanted Grogu out of danger if he could help it, but, just to be a little bit critical here, he could have made things so much more easier, which is, again, I think the writing reason as to why he wasn't involved, because with the amount of times we saw Grogu go like this, and like that, with troopers and Moff Gideon himself, he could have just gone like that and pushed each trooper down a little deathless pit like that of the Death Star that Palpatine fell down, and making it a lot less of a struggle for Din Djarin to make his way through. So the Force could have been very handy there, but I guess it allowed for Din Djarin to have some badass moments. They make their way into the cloning room, and this time we have a much better look at who is in the cloning tanks, and it turns out they are all clones of Moff Gideon. I did feel like it was a little bit cheesy, but also funny, I'm not gonna lie, when Grogu was looking at one of the clones of Moff Gideon and the eyes just opened and he let out this little screech and scream. But this is where all of the clone chambers, I think because Din was tapping something into the console nearby, got completely vented of all of their little cloning fluids. So as Moff Gideon says later on, before they could even draw their first breath, Din kind of killed them all. And as he said later, just jumping to that, he was trying to, this is his army that he was referencing at the end of episode 7. There were going to be this perfect army that he was envisioning, not only having the best parts of him, but improved, because he's always fantasized essentially about having the Force. So a Moff Gideon perfected version of himself with the Force is his total dream. One thing I think would have been pretty cool here is because he had the obviously Death Watch-esque helmet, the somewhat Darth Maul helmet, and I know a lot of Star Wars fans were implementing theories of, oh my god, is he like super hardcore Darth Maul, and is there a history there to him in how, yes, he's a Moff and everything like that, but he could have known Darth Maul in some way or just admired him in some way, but they didn't get into any of the imagery of his helmet. Not that they needed to go ham, but a line or something like that would have given some cool backstory into his ambitions of wanting to equip his clones with the Force because he followed or admired Darth Maul's old way of doing things. Now, when we go back to Bo-Katan, this is when we get a bit of a cool scene, somewhat envisioning this hope for the future of Mandalore, because we have those Mandalorians who survived on the surface of Mandalore for years take them to a surface cave. And that also reminds me, they weren't the traitors either, which I thought could have been plausible. Sure, they could maybe have survived off like some food, and as they said, they planted farms, but some people were thinking, well, since this Imperial base was here for a long time, you could argue that Moff Gideon ultimately cracked them. But not the case. Like, every single fan theory was completely subverted this episode. But again, what was cool about this is that it shows that Mandalore can heal despite being obliterated by bombs. You literally have farms in these places. The surface can sustain plant life. So you can imagine with Star Wars technology as well, in 10 years, if that, you could have a lot of greenery on the surface. This is when the armorer informs Bo over the comms that her reinforcements have arrived, and they drop in, including the armorer, and this is like a super badass scene. Like, again, no matter what I think about the overall quality of this episode and the reflection of the season, there are most certainly things I enjoy as a Star Wars fan, and this was 100% one of those moments, if not one of the greatest moments in the whole of the Mandalorian show, where you literally have Bo leading all of her Mandalorians all jetpacked up in the air, igniting the Darksaber and just charging forward. You have a bunch of the Beskar alloy troopers make their way on their jetpacks as well, and they just essentially meet in the air, and it turns into a bit of a cluster F of a mess, if you will. in the coolest of ways. And so this is when Din enters the Shadow Council room, and the door's shut behind him, and this is when we have Moff Gideon enter, starts crying about his clones. We've already talked about that. And this is when they fight, and this turned into a little bit of a formidable fight for Din Djarin, because ultimately we have Moff Gideon's new armor, which is not only resistant to lightsabers and the dark saber, it is super enhanced with strength. So whatever Din seemed to throw at him, he just kind of, if he jetpacked into him, tossed him the other way. And not only that, to top it off, he brought in his 3 Praetorian guards. So at this moment, I was thinking, this is a bit like a video game boss. And I know so many people will understand what I'm saying here, where you have the boss just kind of going like this side to side when you've got a little bit of the health down, and then he brings his mobs in, so you kind of have to deal with that in the meantime. But Grogu was like, I'm not having that. He comes in with his angry face, spamming the no button, and this is when the 3 Praetorian guards go after him. Or I like to call them Proto-Praetorians, because they don't look exactly like they do in The Last Jedi, but that's the whole point. These are very much so prototypes of the First Order to come in quite a few years' time. Din obviously is like, no, seeing 3 Praetorian guards go after Grogu, so he tries to make his way there, but Moff Gideon manages to hold him back. When we cut to the guards with Grogu, it turned into a bit of an entertaining scene, even with Grogu himself enjoying the sport of dodging all of their Praetorian blades. But this is when the episode goes into, it's all about family. Bogutan happens to spot Din in trouble and just like, nope, I'm not having that, and completely rugby tackles him jetpack style in the middle of the air and buys him some time to try and save Grogu. So we have Moff Gideon mocking Bo-Katan a little bit, telling her to, oh, you gotta surrender again or fight. And she ignites the Darksaber and he gets out his Praetorian staff. Once again, lots of cutting between what's going on with Moff Gideon and Bo-Katan, and then Grogu and then Djarin. So we have Grogu fall from one of the lights and he's somewhat buried beneath one of them, and he can't use the Force in this moment, I guess because he's been doing quite a few Jedi jumps, even though after this he uses the Force to help out Din, you know, through swiping one of the Praetorian guards aside every now and again. So I guess it was just to kind of, you know, build up that moment for when Din has to come in and save the day. And I think this is what a lot of people are on about with this episode, with how a lot of it felt, you know, just kind of like a pre-run simulation on the heroic program of a guaranteed result of success. Now, I think we all knew that things wouldn't end too dramatically. Another way to look at it is like playing a kind of known hard video game, but on story mode. And story mode meaning like easy mode. Everything, it didn't really feel, even in the moments where like Grogu was buried underneath one of the light pole things, it's like you don't really ever feel a proper sense of danger, even when Moff Gideon is there or something bad is about to happen. You're like, no, oh, of course Bo-Katan notices and flies in. Oh, of course Grogu's about to, oh no, Din Djarin. Do you know what I mean? So all while this is all entertaining, there's this kind of, okay, cool. You know, it's not, I mean, some of you may disagree with me there, and that's not me calling it inherently awful or anything like that, because I can't negate the entertainment that I was receiving whilst watching this episode, but it for sure felt like things were kind of missing with what was playing out on screen, or the execution and the way things were handled ultimately just didn't really feel like, you know, it was really of too much consequence here. Meanwhile, with Axe Woves, he's coming in hot. I just expected a Kenobi line of something like another happy landing as he was coming in with the capital ship, warning them that he's going to take out the base. So things were getting pretty dire. Bo-Katan and Mando, I guess, which kind of like along with the sacrifice, because it's not like they were urging their way to fly out of there. But again, it's not like you ever felt that anything was really going to happen to those characters in this moment. Moff Gideon tells Bo-Katan to hand over the Darksaber, and he basically crushes the hilt and it bends and thus makes it a defective blade. So I guess the Darksaber is completely out the picture. I don't know if, I guess this is meant to symbolize that, given that the Children of the Watch and, you know, Bo-Katan's people and Mandalorians just ultimately having united together and thus going down a new way. Through it being crushed, I guess they're just meant to symbol like, hey, we're not necessarily adhering totally to the past, and we're just forging our own united path from here on out. Now, with the closing moments of the fight with Moff Gideon, Din. I did really enjoy the kind of family aspect of Bo-Katan, Din Djarin, and Grogu. Like, Bo-Katan completely sweeps in when Din is taking a lot of blaster fire and just pops a shield up just in time, charging Moff Gideon. Grogu appearing and just swiping Moff Gideon to the floor. And this is when the capital ship comes in. Fire is about to engulf everyone. Moff Gideon gets caught up in that. And in this moment, I was like, please don't do a thing where somehow he's 5 meters away and Grogu, Din, and Bo are going to be fine. And thank God, to be honest, again, they didn't do that because we had a bubble shield from the Force conjured up from Grogu, going very, very Kanan style. So this was really, really awesome to see. Gotta love that plot armor there, but kind of joking aside, Grogu is capable of stuff like this. We have seen it before, but then it kind of, you know, always leads into, okay, so if he can do this, why didn't he try take down the blast door last episode? Or why earlier on in this episode didn't he just sweep the guards off the side or help Din Djarin with the troopers on the way to the Shadow Council chamber? So some of you may think it's a bit nitpicky there, but I do think there is valid criticism when you kind of look at things in retrospect. But hey, it was still a really entertaining moment. But ultimately, I'm still going back to how, you know, I don't want to like negate the entertainment, but things still just felt a little bit like I was never really taking anything seriously. And sometimes you have felt like that in the past, which is, I guess, how you're meant to feel. But everything was going pretty swimmingly, even in the face of what seemed like danger. And I swear to God, by the way, if Moff Gideon somehow survived this, I will not be happy. I love Giancarlo Esposito, but do not have Moff Gideon somehow. Moff Gideon has returned again, like the Palpatine line. We don't need that. Now, at the end of the episode, we have the Mandalorians all gathered round the living waters, and this calls back to the rituals we heard about episodes and episodes ago now. So we have Paz Vizsla's kid go through another ceremony, because I guess now he can do it properly. We have Din want Grogu to become a Mandalorian as well, saying that he's his apprentice. He's no longer a foundling, so please add him to the song. But the armor is like, well, he's still too young to speak, so he's too young to take the creed. But this is when they come up with a way of still letting him become a Mandalorian through saying, well, if his parents gave him permission, couldn't he then become a Mandalorian apprentice? And the armor is just like, well, God knows where his parents are, or if they're even still alive. So for a moment I was thinking, oh God, are we going on another quest for the entire next season of Mando trying to find his parents? But no, this is when he opts to adopt him as his son, which is something that's been coming for a very, very long time. So this was very wholesome here. I love the little reaction from Grogu on his face and his little squeak with hearing that Din is technically going to be his dad. And that allows him to give permission for Grogu to become a Mandalorian. Now, one weird thing about it is, I suppose, Grogu's name, because as the armorer says, you are now Din Grogu, Mandalorian apprentice. But does that check out? Because with Boba Fett, you have, you know, that name ordering, and then with Jango, you have Jango Fett. So here, shouldn't it really be Grogu Djarin rather than Din Grogu? It's almost like inferring that Din is Din Djarin's surname. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people talk about this. I mean, I don't really care. It just seems to maybe go against the established way of doing things here. We get a tease and another tease at the very end of what's next for Din Grogu. It's weird saying that now, and Din himself, and that is taking his apprentice on journeys, just as his teacher did for him. This is the way. That kind of makes sense. Since you have an apprentice, teach your apprentice the ways, go out there in the galaxy, and through whatever you're doing, teach him the methods and way of being a Mandalorian. And as this scene ended, we had Grogu looking into the water, and he 100%, when he was reaching out with his hand, knew the mythosaur was down there. But it's not like he can talk, and in this moment, we cut to the underneath the water section, and we still have the mythosaur chilling there. So this 100%, at least to me, indicates that this is Grogu's future mythosaur. And the mythosaur with its eyes opening is just like, well, I'm just waiting for you to grow up. You can take your time. I like sleeping down here. But until then, you know. So I do think Grogu is ultimately the Mandalorian of the future. That's something we've all known for ages anyway. But I suppose it's mainly with what they're going for here, symbolic of the future. And let me know if you agree with me that this is likely Grogu's to claim, in the sense that one day he might go on in the distant future to be the next Mandalore the Great. It's just it's just a while away. Meanwhile, with the other Mandalorians, and they're in the Great Forge in this moment, we have the Armorer present Bo-Katan with the torch, and they relight the Great Forge of Mandalore, like truly signifying that Mandalore has got a whole new future. And that's something I am happy with. It was inevitable and obvious where things were going, but the Mandalorians are back in this period of Star Wars, so there's so much potential in the future. But I have to admit, I'm super intrigued about the politics. I know that Mandalorians are stronger together, as Bo-Katan said, but they still have super fundamental differences. The Children of the Watch, you do not take your helmet off. And then you have the other people, the more modernized Mandalorians. So I don't want to assume that that's got to create more problems. I assume that the new society now is just going to be like, you can either go down this path or that path. But you have to think, inevitably, there's still going to be disagreements and, you know, egos that get in the way of certain Mandalorians going down the more extreme religious old ways, and then somebody who just takes their helmet off. I don't know. I think they're probably done with that now, and that Mandalorians are just going to be better and respect whatever path or version of Mandalorian religion you go down. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that in the future. Now, with Din and Grogu essentially being master and apprentice and father and son, they say hi to Captain Carson Teva, and we had this line of when they say, oh yeah, we appreciate what you did, you made our lives and jobs a lot easier, and we have Din saying, you would have got him eventually, I just got to him first. And I was just thinking, no, like, they wouldn't have. The New Republic is useless, so I think Moff Gideon would have prospered very, very well if it was completely left down to the New Republic and their incompetency. And in this moment, we also had Grogu point out one of the IG droid heads above the bar, and it definitely sounds, well, I've already said it, it seems like they're making Grogu talk a lot more this season, and here he almost said his own full sentence, just completely as if it was like an alien language, but his own language. But it did feel like the first word of that, as he was pointing it out to get Din Djarin's attention, he was like, da, or dad, but more like da. So maybe I'm reading too into that, but it was kind of cute if that was intentional, since he technically is his father now. Before we leave, Din Djarin basically offers his services for more bounty hunting on a case-by-case basis. So the new status quo going forward, with Din Djarin teaching his son the Mandalorian ways, is going into a more Season 1 vibe, which could be pretty cool for the future. Although I do admit, without rehashing Season 1, I'm super intrigued as to where things could go from here on out. And what I mean by that is they're going to be like, Grogu and Din adventures. One episode, we need to get this guy, carbonite him. Next episode, a bit of a sticky situation and some entertaining Star Wars moments, and then put that guy in carbonite. You would have to think that the main plot of the season, or Season 4, would have a little bit more on the surface there, or stuff going on, but we don't have Moff Gideon anymore. We don't have other things like Luke Skywalker involved anymore, because Grogu chose his path. So, man, where are things going to go outside that of like a, you know, just a bounty hunter episode to episode thing? People love the bounty hunter thing in the first season, but obviously we had a much grander plot going on. Maybe since he's working for the New Republic, there could be some interesting leads from Imperial remnants that he goes after in the bounty hunter form that lead to more of the Shadow Council, and that could be an interesting plot. But let me know your ideas down in the comments below. Meanwhile, with Grief Karga and Navarro, he gives him a deed to a little kind of house outside of Navarro, which was pretty awesome. So after a bounty hunter mission, they have a little cool pad to go back to, and a little garden and all things like that. I mean, that was like really, really sweet and wholesome with the way the episode ended off there. But obviously, we had IG come back as well. I thought that IG was going to be rebuilt to go along with them, but no, Din has actually donated the IG droid as a sheriff of Navarro, and I thought that was ultimately a good story decision because it comes full circle. And that's essentially the end. Of course, we have them chilling at their new home. Grogu is playing with a frog, like floating it with the Force, and they almost do a little Looney Tunes kind of ending there. And this must be what Filoni somewhat meant by the sense of an ending, even though we should be getting a Season 4 from everything we've heard. And Filoni essentially said, if you're wondering, that the fans will have a lot to take in, and I think with any good ending, there's the moment you're in it when you're cheering and you feel satisfied, but then there's a little bit after that when you think back at all the things that happened, maybe you start to put them together in a different way, and you realize it's an ending. But there are other things happening out there in the galaxy that now you know more about. And that's what I meant with the continuation of this show. Even though this was somewhat of an ending, there is stuff that we've learned with the Shadow Council and Thrawn and God knows what else out there. So there can still be other things that they cross their paths with, maybe working for the New Republic, the bounty hunter contracts that lead them more in that direction, even though this kind of was, especially with the Looney Tunes somewhat ending, a somewhat happy, satisfying ending for them. I mean, in theory, if they really, really wanted to, not that they're going to, they could actually end it here. Like we know in our headcanon, Din and Grogu are going to go on more bounty hunter contracts. They've literally got a little safe place outside Navarro. Navarro is protected by IG-11. He's training Grogu in Mandalorian apprentice ways. You could end it here if you want to and just assume that, sure, they get in trouble from time to time on a difficult bounty hunter contract, but things should be okay. So there we have it, guys. Mandalorian Season 3 is over. The Mandalorians now have Mandalore. Now, overall, just looking back at this season, I know some people don't disagree, and I know you guys know that I've still enjoyed, like, this show, but I will kind of say, just in retrospect, even though I was aware of this as the episodes were unfolding, it's still kind of like, Like, I 100% don't believe that episode 7 and 8 redeemed the whole season. I never thought that was possible anyway. Some of you may disagree with the idea of it doesn't even need to be redeemed, but maybe that's a poor choice of words there. But I'm just saying, does it make the whole season freaking awesome? I don't think so. I think it was just very, very mid amongst all of the Star Wars entertainment I did get. And I don't like using the word mid because it's quite a blanket statement, but I think you've all heard the criticisms by now with how things were moving along this season. I don't necessarily agree when people say it was completely directionless, because it did have a direction. Like, we had the whole Mandalorian direction, Mandalorians getting back Mandalore, people being united. There was a direction there. It's just what came with that and the execution of the season and the pacing. It did feel as though most of these episodes, in fact all 8, could have been done in the first 5. That's not negating some of the fun Star Wars adventures we get on the side, like we've had in previous seasons, like the jailbreak one. I do enjoy episodes like that, but then you just combine it with like Din Djarin taking a complete back seat. Now, I did enjoy Bogutan, Katie Sackhoff, she's great, having a much more center and pivotal role. But it just kind of added to this season that felt like it oddly lost this momentum that made The Mandalorian just so freaking engaging in the past. You know how a lot of people felt like the Book of Boba Fett just somewhat meandered so much through its season, and sure, a lot of us fans still enjoyed moments here and there, but it was kind of like, what's going on kind of thing. It had a story. Nobody can take that away from it. It had a somewhat direction, but it meandered. And this season felt like the Book of Boba Fett meandering. So to emphasize, you can't say it didn't do this, it didn't do that. Like Bogutan didn't become the leader. The Mandalorians didn't get Mandalore back. All that happened. It's just, there's something missing to it that fans, or a lot of fans, I would say a majority of fans, aren't just inventing in their heads, like, or hating for hating's sake. That's no issue. If you enjoyed it so much or thought it was amazing, more power to you. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think these criticisms are coming out of complete thin air, or people should trivialize fan criticisms to the point of, oh, fans will just never be happy. I disagree with that. There were definitely things off about this season. But in the conclusion of this season, I'm super happy that Din Djarin isn't dead, and most of those rumors were false. What's the next big thing? It feels like the next big thing naturally in Star Wars in general is Thrawn and Ahsoka and getting the Ghost Crew back and Ezra. Like, that seems like the next main plot thing, and it feels like this one, all while we do enjoy it a lot, The Mandalorian, because it brought back Star Wars to fans in a lot of ways after The Last Jedi that people weren't necessarily expecting, but it almost feels like The Mandalorian, especially with Season 3 episodes, it kind of feels like it's run its course a little bit. Not that I'd be opposed to future episodes, I need to stress that, but there is this feeling of even Grogu feels like it's kind of run the course. Like, I would enjoy more Grogu content, but yeah, I'm rambling at this point. So what did you think of the finale here? But in retrospect, what do you think of the season as a whole? Of course, let me know your ideas on where things could go in Season 4 as well. And just in general, anything that I'm forgetting to ask about right now. If you enjoyed this review, guys, I would really appreciate a like. Hit that like button, especially if you got to this point. Maybe subscribe for more Star Wars videos. Going to be covering Ahsoka and all good things like that. We've got a good time ahead with that, I believe, and Grand Admiral Thrawn making his proper live action entry. So that is, get some hype for that. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, just thank you again so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.